Hello, my name is Greg Ellis. Have you ever had to present a QR code to verify your vaccination status before entering a sporting event or a restaurant or a movie theater? If so, then you know what a smart health card actually is. Today we're going to be building an app that allows you to scan a smart health card, display the information, and verify that the information is valid and hasn't been tampered with. We're going to be using Swift and UIKit to accomplish this, and it's a 6-part series, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please like and subscribe to the channel, and enjoy. Hi everyone, Coder Greg Ellis here. I hope everyone's doing well. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build an iPhone app from a blank project to an app that's suitable for submitting to the App Store for approval. We're going to be using Swift, UIKit, and storyboards. You're going to learn how to use CocoaPods to import third-party libraries into your app. You're going to learn how to use SQLite for local data storage and retrieval. You're going to learn how to use the camera to scan QR codes and extract the information from within them. You're also going to learn a bunch of other things along the way, such as model view controller architecture and some little tricks that make coding easier for you. So the app we're going to be making today is a smart health card QR code reader. I know it's a lot of words to say, hard to say, but it's pretty cool. You've probably had to use a smart health card QR code. And if you haven't, basically what it is if you want to enter a local establishment or go to a live event or maybe go to a sporting event, chances are in your country they're asking you to provide a smart health card QR code to verify your vaccination status in order for you to enter the establishment. And so that's what we're going to do. We're building an app that's going to read that information and verify that it's legitimate, and also show the information such as first name, your birth date, and your vaccination status. So let's have a look at the app. If you look in the top left of your screen here, there's an app called Smart Health QR. This is what we're going to make. So as you can see, there's a tab bar with 2 items on the bottom. So we have verifier and settings. So we basically have 2 pages. And the first page we just have an image, some text, and a button. And on the second page we have a UI table view controller with 5 items in it. So a very simple user interface. Even though this first page has 1 button on it, there's actually a lot of code that goes in behind that. So don't let that fool you. You're going to learn a lot of things today, and it's going to be some pretty cool stuff. So this is what we're going to make. Here's what will happen. This is a simulator. So if I click this button, the simulator has no camera, so I can't show you how it scans on the simulator. But what I've done is, in the code, I've detected if the app's running on a simulator, and if it is, it just feeds the app the same information that would come from scanning a QR code into the view controller for display. So if we push on it, imagine the phone camera turning on and you scan someone's QR code, bam, it brings up this screen that will tell you whether or not the QR information is verified, partially verified, or not verified. And so you might be asking, well, how do you know if it's verified? Well, always, there's an issuer for the QR code. So where I live, it's the province of Alberta. They will get my information from the health authority. They will encode the information into the QR code, and then they will sign that QR code with a private key that only they know. And what this app does is it takes their public key and it uses that to verify that the information that I read from the QR code has been signed with that key. And if it has been, then it's verified. And in this app, what I've done is I've also put in partially verified, which could be, there's a bunch of different reasons why you might be partially verified. Maybe you only have 1 shot and you need 2. Or maybe you have 2 shots, but your second shot has not passed the threshold to be valid, such as maybe your local region requires you to be 10 days out from your last shot. Well, if you're not, then this app can say, well, no, he's got the shots, but he's only partially verified because he hasn't had his last shot long enough ago to be valid. So we're going to do that. I have a little security feature on date of birth here, so that if someone scans your QR code, you might not want someone peering at your birth date, so the person scanning it can quickly tap the eyeball and go, okay, compare it with your photo ID, and then click it back again to hide it. Maybe not the most useful thing in the world, but I thought it'd be cool to put in here, and it gives us something to make. So that's going to be cool. And there's a scan next button here. You know, if you're a employee at one of these establishments, and you can probably be scanning a whole bunch of people in a lineup, so you're going to want to quickly go to the next, scan the next QR code, scan the next QR code. So we put that in there. And that's basically it. So let's get started building the actual app. First, you want to open up Xcode, and we're going to make a new project. And you want to make sure iOS is selected and make sure app is selected and push next. And I'm going to call my app Smart App. You can call it whatever you want. Make sure Storyboard is selected and make sure Swift is selected. Then push next and create. Okay. First thing I like to do is it always sets the deployment target for the version of iOS to the most recent one. But I like to go back a few versions or a couple versions because I don't want to exclude any people that haven't upgraded yet. So we'll make it iOS 13. Not entirely necessary, but that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to be using model view controller design pattern. So the first thing I like to do is add the folders in here. So I make a views folder for my views. I make a controllers group for my controllers. And then I make models folder for my models. And then I like to have a helpers one too, in case there's something that doesn't fit in those buckets. So now we have a view controller here, which we're going to put in our controllers folder because that's where all our controllers are going to go. I usually leave these app delegate and scene delegate just hanging out here. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So we're going to do that. Now, this is your basic project structure on the left-hand side. You're going to be dealing mostly inside here with these. In this tutorial, you're going to be dealing with this a lot. So this main right here is your storyboard. It's your main storyboard. So we're going to click on that. And this is where we're going to create the user interface. Now, if you can remember, our user interface, if I can bring it up again here. Our user interface had a tab bar controller as the first view controller that comes up, and that's these two buttons down here. And then in each one of these items we have a view controller that's inside a navigation controller. So this blue bar up here is a navigation controller. You can have buttons on the left and right hand sides. You can see we don't have any in this app, but maybe at some point you want to add a help button on the top left, and that help button, when you click it, goes to a new page. It's just nice to have it in a navigation controller. So I almost always put my view controllers in a navigation controller in a setup like this when I'm in a tab bar. Unless there's some reason why I don't need to, I almost always put them in there. It gives you more flexibility. So that's what we're going to do. So in order to get that structure, what we have to do is we need a tab bar controller first. So there's a plus button up here to get to your control libraries. So we can go click that, and you're going to want to look for tab bar controller and drag it down. And it comes with these two items. I'm not, like I said, I don't usually code with storyboards ever. I'm always using code. I know enough about storyboards to get myself in trouble, let's put it that way. Okay, so we have a tab bar controller, but this, you can see this arrow here is pointing towards our initial view controller. Well, we want our tab bar to be our initial. So click on your tab bar controller, and there's a checkbox underneath this attributes inspector, and it's called is initial. We want to check that, and it'll automatically switch from having the view controller being the initial view controller to our tab bar controller being the initial, which is what we want. So we're going to do that. Next, we need to hook up view controllers to our tab bar. So we already have a view controller that was created for us. You can see here. And we're going to use that one. So if you control click on the tab bar controller and then drag to the view controller, let go, you'll see an option called view controllers under relationship segue. You want to click on that, and that hooks up our view controller to be the first item in our tab bar controller. Now we need another view controller because we want a settings page. So go to your controllers folder, right click, new file, pick Cocoa Touch class, hit next. I'm going to call my controller settings view controller and make sure that subclass of is set to UI view controller. and the language is Swift. When that's all been confirmed, hit next and create. I always take this out because I don't usually use it. And now we have a class for our settings view controller. So, but we also have to create it in the storyboard. So click the plus sign for the library again, look up UI view controller, find view controller and drag it down. And we're going to do the same thing we did to the first view controller. We're going to control click on the tab bar controller and drag it onto our view controller. Go to relationship segue and click view controller. There we go. So now that's basically exactly what we want, except for one thing. Remember I said that we want to have these in a navigation controller. So we need a nav controller that houses these. The easiest way to do that is to click on your view controller. So we're going to do the top one first. Go to editor, embed in, and then click on navigation controller. Now it's in a nav controller. We're going to do the same thing for the other one, editor, embed in, navigation controller. There. So that's pretty much exactly what we want. Now there's one thing we have to do. This settings view controller, we don't have it hooked up to our class. If you notice on our view controller here, if we select it and we go to the identity inspector, it's set, the class is set to view controller. So this ties that to our view controller class. So the code we write in here will affect this. But on the new controller we created, we did not set that yet, and we want to set it to settings view. So you want to click on your new view controller, which will be your settings controller. Make sure you have attributes inspector, or sorry, identity inspector selected. And then we're going to type in settings. There we go. Now it should be hooked up to our view controller. Now to make sure it is, let's just go into view controller. And we're going to just change the color of the background so we can find out if we have these all hooked up. So we'll make the first one red, we'll make the settings view controller green. And we just do that by taking the current view, setting the background color to what we want. So let's run it. First I'm going to select my simulator that I want to use. And so there we go. We have red, and on the second one we've got green. So we know they're hooked up, so we can delete this code now. And so now what we want to do is, in order to make this look good, we need to add some graphics. If you go under the description of this video, there will be a link to a zip file that contains all the resources you need for this project. So I happen to have them on my desktop here, so I'm just going to grab them. And it comes with the database, it comes with an app icon. So what we're going to do is we're going to select everything in the folder except for database, except for the DB and the icons, and we're going to drag them into our assets catalog. So you make sure you have the assets catalog selected and you drag them in. Now they're available for us to use. Okay. And here's, if you go to app icon, we can also add in the app icon as well. So let's do that right now. Go to the tutorial resources folder and just go to icon, and we'll hook up, we'll put all the icons in. So we need 1024 here, we need 167 here, we need 152 here, 76 here, 80 here, 40 here, 58 here. By the way, if anyone knows of a faster way to do this, I'd appreciate you typing in the comments. I don't see why we can't just drag all these. I don't actually see why you can't drag a 1024 by 1024 icon and Xcode just sizes them down and puts them in the right spot. I'm not sure why they don't have that feature. I mean, that would save a lot of time. Anyhow, we'll do it the hard way so that when we figure out what the easy way is, our life will become much easier. Look at the positive side of things, right? Okay, so 60, 40. All right. Our app icon is in there. And we have all the images we need. So now what we can do is go back to our main storyboard, and we need to hook up our icons. So if you click on the navigation controller item, You'll see it right here. And then go to the attributes inspector. You'll see item as the title. Our title, we want it to be, I think I called it verifier, so we'll call it verifier. And we want to put an icon in there. And I want it to be a QR code, but I have one here. You can use this as the image. But there's also another one. It's built in, QR code.viewfinder, which kind of looks a little cooler to me, so I'm going to use that one. And then go to our settings one. I want to make it a gear icon. I'm going to call the title settings, and then use our settings icon. So now, after you've done that, we'll run it to make sure that our icons are showing up properly and make sure things are looking good. And they are. So everything looks good. We can't see our navigation controller yet. It's not there. We can't see our titles either. So let's do that. Let's set that up to make sure our navigation controller works as well. So you can probably do this through the storyboard. Like I say, I'm not a storyboard expert by any means. I don't really use them that much. But if someone knows, again, in the comments, let me know how to do it through the storyboard. But right now, we're going to do it through the code. So we go to a view controller class, type in self.title, and make it equal to what you want to call this. I'm going to call it verifier. And then in settings, I'm going to do the same thing. Self.title equals settings. And if we run it, it should show the title in the navigation bar. So you see verifiers here and settings is there. Perfect. Now, you will notice that our navigation bar is not that cool blue color like we had in our other app. So let's set it up for that, okay? Now, we made a helpers folder here. We're going to make a themes class because we want, when we add colors to our app, we don't want to be duplicating code for a color all over the app, because if we want to change the color of the app later on, we don't want to go through 15 files trying to find where the color is. We don't want to repeat anything. So go into your helpers folder, make a new file, pick Swift file, hit next, call this file theme. That's going to be the theme of our app. And then we're going to want to import UIKit, and our class is going to be named theme. So we make a new class theme, we make a new class colors, and here's where we're going to add in the code for the colors we want our navigation bar to be. So let's call it, we'll make another class function, and we're going to call it, let's just call it navigation bar background color, and it's going to return a UI color. And our color, the color we want is, let me go look this up. I forget what color I made it actually. Okay, the nice blue color that we want is going to be 0, and the green is going to be 162. And the blue is going to be 220. And alpha, we don't want it to be opacity. We want no opacity at all. Now, if you're a beginner and you don't understand why I'm taking these numbers and dividing them by 255, it's because I'm putting in the red, green, blue value from Photoshop for the color I want, and it comes in as red, green, blue, but the UI color constructor takes in a number between 0 and 1 to represent the red, green, blue. So I'm just taking the value in 255 format and basically dividing it by 255 to get a value between 0 and 1. And that's that. So now that that's done, we can use this in our view controller appearance code. So our UI navigation control appearance code. So what we need to do, iOS 15, they changed how navigation controller works by default. Now the UI navigation controller is transparent by default, so we don't want that. We want ours to be blue. So in order to do that, we have to check to make sure, we have to check if we're running iOS 15 or higher, and if we are, there's a few extra things we need to do than if we're running a lower version. So the first thing we have to do is check what version of iOS we are using, or what version of iOS the app's running on. You do that using the available feature, and you go iOS 15. This means iOS 15 or higher, else we want to do something else. So we need to use the appearance feature of the UI navigation bar. in order to change the color of the UI navigation bar globally. So everyone in our app will be affected based on this for navigation bars. So the first thing we have to do is configure with an opaque background. That makes it so it's not transparent. Then we want to make our title color, we want it to be white because we're going to be on a blue background. We want to be able to see it. So foreground color is white. And then for our background color, we're going to set it equal to what we just made. So theme, colors, navigation background color. And then we need to set this on the navigation bar, the standard appearance, and there's a new one for iOS 15. I believe it's scroll edge appearance. You need to set these to our appearance so that the navigation bar shows up blue instead of transparent. If you don't set these, then it gives you some really weird results. Now, if you're on a previous version of iOS, less than 15, then it's a little bit easier. Your code doesn't, the default action on the UI navigation bar is not transparent. It's opaque, so you don't have to set up the standard appearance and the scroll edge appearance because it's set to what we want by default. So all we need to do is basically copy and paste this code to set up the background color, or sorry, to set up the title text attributes, because that doesn't really change. And we also need to set the bar tint color, which changes basically the background color of the navigation bar. The bar tint color doesn't seem to do anything in iOS 15 anymore from what I can tell. So there. Now you'll notice that our did finish launching with options function here is getting a little messy. So what you can do is select all the code we just wrote, right click, refactor, extract to method, and just call it, I'm going to call mine setup navigation appearance, and extract that into its own method. That way it keeps our did finish launch with options method nice and clean. So now if we did everything right, then we should have a blue navigation bar now. And we do. Looks like it worked. So perfect. That is awesome. All right, so we have the basics of our app navigation set up. Our storyboards have been created. We're not entirely done because, as you noticed in our other app, there is another screen that we display the information from a QR code on. So we will have to add another view controller eventually. But right now, our basic navigation is completed. And so what we're going to do here is there's a few libraries we're going to have to use from third parties to make this app. So I've used CocoaPods to do this, which is a technology that lets you import third-party projects from GitHub. And so we're going to implement that right now. So what we're going to do is okay, so we have to go and install CocoaPods if you don't already have it installed. I'm on a new computer, so it actually isn't installed on mine, so you're going to learn how to do that right now. Sudo gem install CocoaPods, and then you wait for it to run, and there we go. So what we need to do is close our project here, or actually I can just what I'm going to do is set my directory to where my app resides by dragging it over here. I want to change my directory to that folder. So you want to be in the root of your project, so you want to be at the folder above your Xcode prog. Once you've changed the directory to that, then you can just go pod init. This will set up your app for using CocoaPods. And you'll see it created a pod file in here. So that pod file we're going to use to import all the third-party tools that we need to import for this project. So let's open this up. And then we're going to set our platforms because we made it 13. We're going to make it 13. And let's grab the pods we need. Okay, so right underneath the pods for Smart App, or whatever you called your app. If you called your app something different than Smart App, it won't say Smart App, but it'll have the target name of what you called your app. We need we're gonna need a few different pods. So the first one we're gonna need is Jose Swift. This is gonna allow us to work with JSON web signatures very easily. And because that's technology that they use for smart health cards, we're going to need that. So that's the first one you need to type in. Next one, somebody made a really cool addition in GitHub called Swift QR Scanner. So this lets us more easily scan QR codes. So we'll just type in HTTPS GitHub. Okay. And we're going to use GRDB, which is a layer on top of SQLite to make it easier for us to work with SQL, with our SQLite database. And then Eureka is a very cool form builder for Swift, which makes our lives a lot easier, especially in a tutorial where, we don't want to bore you for too long with a bunch of setup code. So if we typed all these in, actually I spelled this wrong. If we didn't make any more spelling mistakes, then when we install all these, our app should be set up with everything we need. So save that file. And now what you're going to do, we'll have to close our project altogether because when we use CocoaPods to import these pods, it's going to make a new project we have to open our project with now. So if you go back to the command line, type in pod install, we have an error. Let's see. We spelled something wrong, so we have to open this back up. We have a capital P here. We'll get rid of that. Pod install. And it makes a new project file called whatever your app name is, .xc workspace. That's what you're going to want to open your project with from now on. And there we go. So now we have a new project in our project navigator here called pods, and you'll see inside there all the pods we imported show up. And so now we'll build it to make sure it still builds. Sometimes using CocoaPods can cause some errors to show up. We want to make sure everything's working properly, so we're going to build it, and then we're going to run it to make sure everything's working. Okay. So let's run it, make sure our app still works. All right, everything looks good. So now that we have that set up, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder called database. And if you open up our tutorial files that we had, that you downloaded, there's a database in there called db.db. We're going to drag that over into our database folder and check on copy items if needed, and then add to targets, pick Smart App, and push finish. Now this is our database that we're going to use. Let me show you what we're using it for. I have a program called SQLite, or DB browser for SQLite, and we're just going to go in. Oh, what's happening here? Okay. We have to go into Smart App, database. Okay. So this is our database. Rather than bore you with creating all these tables, I put the database in the resources folder so you can just copy it in. Basically what I did was, the only folder or the only table you're really actually going to need is this vaccine one, and all it does is when you scan a Smart Health QR code, which we'll get into in more detail, you're going to get some information back that ties the vaccination in the QR code to a list of descriptors. So if we go to browse and we go into vaccine, there's a whole bunch of CVX codes, and those are the codes that will show up when you scan a QR code. So based on someone's vaccination, they're going to have a different CVX code than other people might have, depending on the vaccination type that they received. So this is a lookup table is all it really is. We're going to use this to display the description of the vaccine that the person received. So I typed all these in from the CDC's website, and I'll put a link in the description so you can see where I got them, but I just went and found these based on, once I scanned my own QR code and I saw the information that came back, all it gave me was a CVX code. So I did a search for that and found out the CDC had a list of all of these. So this isn't a complete list because there's more for different countries and everything, but this was enough. So basically, I copied these from an Excel worksheet that CDC gave out into a SQLite database so we can use them. And so it's just a table with 5 fields in it, and the only ones we're really using is the name, the description, and the CVX code. We'll get more in detail into that when we talk about the file format structure. But just so you know, that's what we're using it for. And so once you have your database created, you can save it. You can give it whatever extension you want to. I just gave it DB, and I do this for almost every project. I use SQLite databases over core data, and the reason why is because most apps I build, if they do well on iOS, then I want to put them on Android. Core data does not exist on Android, so if I want local data storage, and I'm building cross-platform apps, I want to be able to take the same data and bring it over to Android without too much trouble. So I always use SQLite, I guess because I've come from a back-end background to begin with, but that's the reason I do it, and that's why we're using it in this app. So now what we're going to do is we have to interact with this database, and like I said before, we're using GRDB to interact with our database. Now, for a database connector, you only want to have one instance of a database class in your app ever. I don't see any reason why you'd ever want to have multiple instances of a class that interacts with the database. So what I do is I make a database manager. So I'm going to make a new Swift file. We're going to call it database manager. We're going to put it in the helpers folder. Okay, and we need to import our pod that we imported, which is GRDB, because that's what we're going to use to make our lives easier working with SQLite. Okay, so we'll make a new class called database manager, and we're going to add some properties. DB name, we'll make it unwrap string, and database path, which will be the path to our database, and database queue, which I'll explain a little bit more as we go on what that's for, but that's basically how we create a connection to our database. Now I'm going to put in some functions that let us, basically this is going to be a singleton. So like I said, we only ever want one instance of our class, and so this is how we make sure we only ever have one instance of our class, is by adding in a shared instance property. And the reason I do it like this in this function is because there's sometimes, and maybe not in this app, but where when someone accesses this, you might want to do some setup. You might want to do some setup code in between creating the instance and returning it. We're not doing that in this situation, but you might, this gives you the flexibility. If you ever have to, you can do that. So we put that in the enclosure, and now I like to do this just for readability. I add a shared function which simply returns the shared instance. And that'll allow it to be a singleton, which is only ever, there's only ever one instance of our database manager we can access from anywhere in our app. And I also always like to include a function that excludes our database from backup. And the reason why is because if you have a bunch of data in a database, and some apps have a lot of data in a database, and you submit that without excluding this from iCloud backup, Apple could reject your app because they don't like to store boilerplate data in iCloud. They only want user-created, user-generated information in the database. So I always include this function, which allows you to exclude our database from iCloud backup in case we need to. So we're going to write it in here. So here's how we do that. We set this to is excluded from backup. And we set the file URL. And if there's an error, we're just going to print error excluding. Absolute string from backup. And that's it. So that kind of sets up the initial code. Now what we're going to need is we need to be able to copy our database from our bundle, which is over here in our app bundle. We want to copy that from our bundle into the user's document directory so that the app can use it. So, and we're only going to want to do that once. So we're going to have a function called copydb. And it's going to return whether it's successful or not. So we need a variable for our return value. I'm just going to set it to false by default. And we need to take our DB name, our extension, and we need to replace the extension with nothing. So basically this function is going to just copy the file from our bundle into the user's document directory. So we have to do some setup code like this. If there's an error, we want to make sure the value is false. Now we have to use the file manager to detect if the file already exists or not. How we do that is we get a pointer to the file manager, and if file manager file exists, so if the database if the database doesn't exist, we want to copy it over. So take our database path, and if it does not exist, we need to copy it. Otherwise, we're good. So we're going to say the return value is true and database file was found at the path like that. Now if the file is not found, we need to copy it over. So how we do that is we take the database file path first, and we get it from bundle main path for resource name and extension. So what that does is we're trying to find the file in our bundle, and the syntax for doing that is you need to give the resource name and the extension separately. So that's why we went up here and we took the file name, we took the database name, and we separated the name from the extension. And that's just so we can pass that information in the format this function expects. So once we get that, now we can copy the item over. So we're going to copy it to DB file path, to the database path where we want it to be. And then here's where I will exclude this from iCloud backup and then return true. Now we got a problem here. What did I do wrong? Cannot convert value of type string to expected return. Oh, I didn't. I've got a path. So there. I used the wrong initializer. And we also need to return true, or return our return value. Okay. It helps if we do it inside our actual function. All right, so now that function's done, and well, actually, if it can't find the path, we actually have to return false. So we'll just do. Uh-oh. So this just means that if we ever get here into this else statement, that means that the database does not exist in the app bundle. So that should never happen because it's right there. So there you go. This function copies the database over to the user's document directory, and that's what we need to have happen. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to open this database. So once it's been copied over, we need to be able to open this so we can actually use it. So make it open, and the same thing, we'll assume false. And so we're going to try to open the database using grdb. So we use our db queue, and we make it equal to database queue. We pass the path in as a string, and then if it succeeds, we're okay, and if it doesn't succeed, we're not okay. And there. So now we have the open function as well. Now the next thing we need to do is to wrap sort of this whole initialization code up in our database manager. We need a function that's going to check and load the database. That we can call from our data finish launching with options. So our DB name is going to be equal to the file name we pass in, and then our database path is going to be equal to the documents directory where we want to copy it to, and then we're going to append the name on it. So in order to do that, it's another situation where we don't want to be duplicating code on how to get the documents directory. So in our helpers function, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call it common. And inside there, we need a function that allows us to get the document directory. So we need to import UIKit first of all. So import. Okay. Then our class is going to be called common. And again, I make this a singleton, just like we did with our database manager. For the same reasons. And so common. It's the exact same code, so you set it up like this. You can add setup code here if you want to. And then again, we need to be able to get the documents directory in a way that we don't have to reduplicate our code all the time. So I'm just going to use a function get documents directory append, so that I can append the file name onto the end. And I'm just going to return a URL. So if we call this, it's going to, we want it to return the path to the documents directory with the text we pass in appended on the end. So that'll be our database name. So it's going to look like this. We're going to get our path from file manager, and we want the documents directory, and we need to have that. And then we know there's only ever one documents directory, so it's safe to do this. And we can return the documents directory by appending a path component of text. Okay, so if we did that right, then we should be able to do common get documents directory with db name, and that should be good. I think so. Okay, so now we have the path. We've created the database path we need from the name that's been passed into our function, and now we have to make sure that we copy it if we need to copy it. So we're going to try to copy the database. So if everything works fine, then we're good. If not, we're going to print a message saying couldn't copy database. And then we're going to try to open the database, and if it doesn't open, we're going to give a message as well. So if we try to open the database and it doesn't work, then we're going to say error opening database. And then otherwise, we're good. So in this sort of situation, if everything's fine, you might want to, here you could maybe upgrade the database, you know, if necessary. A lot of things you can do there. We don't need to do that here, but in the future, if you had version 1.2 and you have to add a table to the database or a field to a couple tables, you're going to need to upgrade it. So that's where you'd want to do that, is right here. So we have the basics for our database manager completed, and you can reuse this in every project you ever make. I use the same stuff over and over and over all the time. We just wrote this code right now, but in the future, you're not going to write this again. You're going to use it over and over and over. So that's perfect, but that's exactly what we want. So we're done the database manager now, but in our app delegate, here's where we can actually use it. So let's just build our project to make sure it works, because we wrote a lot of code there. We could have easily made a mistake, and we're going to run it. Okay, everything seems to still compile and run, so we're good. Now go back to your app delegate file. We have a function called setup navigation. Wow, I spelled that wrong. Let's fix that. Okay, I'm still getting used to my new keyboard on this M1. It's the keys are slightly different than my last one, so I'm typing the wrong keys sometimes. But I love this new M1. It's great. Okay, so now to set up the database, it's pretty easy now, because we'll make a new function called setup database, And all we're going to do is call database manager .shared, and we're just going to call check and load database, and our file name we already know is db.db as it is over here, and then we just call that in our app did finish launching. And if everything works, here, let's just go back to our database manager for a second, because I want to just so we know everything's working right. We're just going to print database opened successfully so that we know. And then here, let's just move this. We'll move this down to here just so we know if everything worked. So let's run this and see if we get the message we need. Now, database did open successfully, so everything appears to have worked. We didn't get any error messages, and we didn't get this. This says the file was found. So if we run it again, this database file was found at path should show, because, and there we go. So we run it. The database file was found at this directory, and it opened successfully. That's exactly what we want to have happen. So now we know our database is set up successfully. Now, that's perfect. We've got all that code written, and we can carry on about our business.